My fiancé forced me to give up my dog for our wedding, claiming it was for love, only for me to discover he secretly sold my best friend to a puppy mill for $500 while plotting to steal my entire life savings. I am sitting here in what was supposed to be our dream apartment, realizing the man I slept next to for 3 years is actually a stranger who planned to use my $200,000 to pay off his parents' gambling debts and move his secret mistress into the home I paid for. He looked me in the eye and told me I was crazy for loving a dog, twisting my reality until I apologized for existing, all while he was erasing my future. Is it considered murder if the person you are grieving never actually existed, but was just a mask worn by a monster? I have the evidence right here to ruin his life and leave his entire family homeless. But my hands are shaking so hard I can barely breathe. Everyone is telling me to walk away. But how can I let him do this to someone else? What would you do? My name is Rose Miller. I am 32 years old, and on paper, I am the definition of a modern American success story. I work as a senior interior designer for one of the most prestigious firms in downtown Chicago. My portfolio is filled with minimalist penthouses and sprawling suburban estates that I have curated for people with more money than taste. I have a credit score that most people would kill for, a diversified investment portfolio, and a 2-bedroom apartment in the Gold Coast district that I bought entirely with my own money. I am independent. I am capable, but if you strip away the accolades and the designer labels, I am, or at least, I was, a woman terrified of silence. I have spent my entire adult life running from the gnawing fear that I might end up alone. That pathetic, needy part of me is exactly what Mark Peterson saw the moment he walked into my life. He did not see a strong woman. He saw a target. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The wind was already cutting through the streets of Chicago, carrying the scent of dead leaves and coming snow. Inside my apartment, however, everything was warm. I remember standing in front of my floor-to-length mirror, smoothing out the fabric of my emerald green silk dress. Mark had told me to dress up. He said he had a surprise. You look breathtaking, Rose. Mark was leaning against the doorframe of our bedroom. He was 34, with the kind of jawline you see in razor commercials and a smile that practiced perfection. He wore a navy suit that I knew I had paid for. Technically, I had lent him the credit card to pick it up because his bonus had not cleared yet. That was a phrase I heard often. The bonus has not cleared yet. I smiled back, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest. You clean up nice yourself, Mr. Peterson. At my feet, a low thump-thump-thump rhythm began. It was Buster, my 6-year-old golden retriever. He was lying on the rug, his tail beating against the floorboards just because I had looked at him. Buster was more than a dog. He was the only reason I had survived my 20s without completely falling apart. When my mother died, he was the one who licked the tears off my cheeks. When I worked 80-hour weeks, he was the heartbeat waiting for me at the door. Mark walked over and kissed my forehead, but as he pulled away, he grimaced slightly and brushed a stray golden hair off his pristine suit jacket. We should go, Mark said, his voice tight. The reservation is in 20 minutes. He did not say goodbye to Buster. He never did. The dinner was at Alinea. It was the kind of place where the menu did not have prices and the waiters moved like ghosts. I was distracted, worrying about whether I had left the water bowl full enough for Buster. When Mark reached across the table and took my hand, the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade. He got down on one knee, right there between the tables. I remember the gasps from the other diners. I remember the diamond, a solitaire cut that sparkled violently under the ambient lighting. "Rose Miller," he said, his eyes glistening with what I thought was love, but now recognized as the thrill of closing a deal. "You are the missing piece of my life. I do not want to spend another day without you as my wife. Will you marry me?" "Yes," I choked out, tears spilling over. "Yes, of course." The restaurant erupted in applause. Champagne was poured. For the next hour, I was floating. I felt safe. I felt chosen. I finally had the family I had always craved. The drive home was quiet. I stared at the ring on my finger, watching the city lights blur past the window. Mark was driving my Audi. He preferred it to his older sedan, and he had a small, satisfied smirk on his face. "I have been thinking about our future," Mark said, breaking the silence as we pulled into the parking garage of my building. "About where we are going to live." I turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" "We have plenty of room in my apartment. It is a 2-bedroom. It is perfect." Mark turned off the engine and sighed. It was a heavy, patronizing sigh, the kind a parent gives a child who does not understand simple math. "Rose, honey, we are starting a family. We cannot raise children in a concrete box in the city. Besides, I found something, a house, a mansion, really, out in Lake Forest." "Lake Forest?" I blinked. That was 40 miles away. And Mark, that is, Soi Jinghao Ling, R. Jinghao Dayu. "It is perfect," he interrupted, his voice gaining intensity. "It is huge. 5 bedrooms, a massive yard. And the best part, my mother can move into the guest wing. She is getting older. Rose, she is lonely. It is our duty to take care of her." My stomach tightened. I knew his mother, Margaret. She was a woman who looked at me like I was a stain on her son's lapel. She made constant, subtle digs about my family background, about how I came from new money while the Petersons were established, even though they never seemed to have any cash flow. "Mark, we have not even discussed living with your mother," I said carefully, trying not to ruin the engagement high. "And a house in Lake Forest? That sounds expensive. We sell your apartment," he said quickly, as if he had rehearsed it. "The equity from this place pays for the down payment on the mansion. It is an investment." "Rose, press." We walked into the apartment. Buster came bounding down the hallway, a golden blur of joy, a stuffed hedgehog in his mouth. He went straight for Mark, tail wagging, eager to welcome him home. Mark recoiled. He actually took a step back and raised his knee, blocking the dog. "Down," Mark snapped. Buster froze, his ears dropping. He looked at me, confused. "Mark, do not yell at him," I said, kneeling to hug Buster. "He is just happy to see us." Mark walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. He stood there, his back to me, gripping the counter. The air in the room shifted. The warmth of the proposal evaporated, replaced by a cold, clinical tension. "That brings me to the other thing," Mark said. He did not turn around. "What thing?" I asked. Standing up, he turned slowly. His face was devoid of the joy he had shown at the restaurant. Now, he looked pained, like a martyr carrying a heavy cross. "If we move to the house, Soi Jinghao Ling, 2# is greater than if my mother moves in with us. Soi Jinghao Ling, 2# is greater than Buster cannot come." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Excuse me?" "My mother," Mark said, speaking slowly and clearly. She has severe anxiety around dogs. It is a psychological condition. Trauma from her childhood. She cannot be in the same house as a beast like that. Her throat closes up. She could have a heart attack. Rose. I looked down at Buster. He was sitting by my feet, looking up at me with those trusting, liquid brown eyes. He was not a beast. He was a soul. Mark, that is ridiculous, I said, my voice trembling. Buster is the gentlest dog in the world. He wouldn't hurt a fly. We are not getting rid of him. Mark put the glass down on the counter with a sharp clack. He walked over to me, invading my personal space. He placed his hands on my shoulders, looking deep into my eyes. I am not asking you to kill him, Rose. I am asking you to prioritize our family. My mother is family. I am your family now. This dog, Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than it is just an animal. He is not just an animal. I whispered, think about the house. Mark pressed, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. Think about the nursery we could build. Think about the life we could have. Are you really going to throw away our marriage? Our future? Everything we just celebrated tonight. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 for a dog. I looked at the diamond on my finger. It felt heavier now. A cold pit formed in my stomach. This was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, but instead, I felt like the walls were closing in. I, Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than I cannot just give him away. Mark, we will talk about it tomorrow, Mark said, kissing my cheek. His lips felt cold. I know you will make the right choice. Rose, you always do. You are a good woman. You would not choose a pet over your husband. He walked into the bedroom, leaving me standing in the living room with Buster. The red flag was waving right in front of my face, bright and crimson. But I was so desperate to be loved, so desperate to keep the fairy tale alive, that I closed my eyes and pretended I did not see it. I sat down on the floor and buried my face in Buster's fur. He let out a soft sigh and rested his heavy head on my knee. I will not let them take you, I whispered into his ear. But even as I said it, a terrifying thought whispered back in my mind. How much are you willing to pay to keep this man? The morning sun that filtered through my bedroom blinds should have brought clarity, but instead, it illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, suspended anxieties. Mark was already awake. I could hear the aggressive clinking of a spoon against a ceramic mug coming from the kitchen. It was a sound I had learned to interpret. He was not just making coffee. He was making a point. I walked into the kitchen, my feet bare against the cold hardwood. Buster trotted beside me, his nails clicking a happy rhythm that used to sound like home, but now sounded like a countdown clock. Mark stood by the island, scrolling through his phone. He did not look up. Good morning, I said, trying to infuse my voice with a cheerfulness I did not feel. Mark took a slow sip of his coffee before acknowledging me. His eyes flickered down to Buster, then back to me with a look of exhausted patience. Did you think about what I said, Rose? Mark asked. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands shaking slightly. I had spent half the night researching, desperately looking for a third option that did not involve losing the two beings I loved most. I did, I said. I pulled out a brochure I had printed at 3 a.m. I found a behavioral specialist. His name is Dr. Evans. He specializes in high-energy breeds and boundary training. If we move to the big house, we can set up specific zones for Buster. He does not have to be in the main living areas when your mother is around. I will pay for everything. Mark took the brochure between two fingers, holding it like it was a piece of soiled tissue. He glanced at it for less than a second before dropping it onto the counter. "It is not about training, Rose," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It is about biology. My mother is a 70-year-old woman with a heart condition. Her fear is physiological. You cannot train away her trauma, but we have not even tried." I pleaded, "Just give it a chance, please, Mark Sihil," rubbing his temples as if I were a child asking for candy before dinner. "Fine. If it makes you feel like you are doing something, go ahead. But when it fails, do not say I did not warn you." I clung to that small victory like a lifeline. I thought I could fix this. I thought if I just worked hard enough, I could make everyone happy. I was so naive. The first crack in my reality appeared 3 days later. I came home early from a site visit, exhausted but eager to take Buster for a walk. As soon as I unlocked the door, I felt the heaviness in the air. Mark was standing in the living room, his arms crossed, staring at the sofa, my beautiful, cream-colored Italian leather sofa. "Rose," Mark said, his voice dangerously low. "Look at this." I walked over. There were muddy streaks smeared across the pristine leather cushions, not just paw prints, but long, chaotic smears of dark earth. I gasped. "Oh my God, I told you," Mark said, shaking his head. "I told you he is destructive. I went out for 20 minutes to get groceries, and I come back to this. He must have jumped up and gone crazy." I looked at Buster. He was lying on his bed in the corner, looking guilty. Or was he just reacting to Mark's anger? I frowned. I remembered wiping his paws thoroughly after our morning walk. I was obsessive about it. I distinctly remembered the texture of the towel and the way he lifted his left paw for me. "I wiped his paws this morning," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Mark scoffed. "Clearly you did not do a good enough job. Or maybe your memory is slipping again. You have been so stressed lately with the wedding planning. You probably just thought you did it." I blinked. Had I imagined it? The doubt crept in, cold and insidious. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I had rushed it. "I am so sorry," I said, grabbing a cleaning cloth. "I will clean it. It is ruined." "Rose," Mark snapped. "That leather absorbs everything. This is exactly what my mother is afraid of. Filth. Chaos." The next incident happened 2 days later. I found my favorite silk blouse, the vintage Yves Saint Laurent, shredded on the floor of the closet. Buster was sitting next to it, chewing on a plastic button. I screamed. It was a guttural sound of frustration. Mark came running in. "See?" he yelled, gesturing wildly at the tatters. "He is acting out. He knows we are talking about him. He is aggressive." "Rose, today it is a blouse. Tomorrow it could be my mother's arm." I sank to the floor, holding the ruined silk. Buster had never chewed clothes in 6 years. Not once. He chewed toys. He chewed sticks, but never clothes. Why was he changing? Was I failing him? Was I failing Mark? I felt like the ground beneath me was tilting. Then came the weekend. Margaret came to visit. Mark's mother was a small woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of steel gray and eyes that assessed the value of everything they touched. She walked into my apartment, clutching her pearls, her breath already coming in short, shallow rasps. Mark had locked Buster in the guest bedroom, but the dog let out a single, low whine from behind the door. Margaret froze. She clutched her chest, her face twisting into a mask of agony. "Is that Xiao Yu?" Tsing Hao Ling. 2 is greater than is that the beast? She wheezed. Mom, it is okay. He is locked up, Mark said, rushing to support her. I can feel him, she gasped, leaning heavily on her son. My chest, it is tightening. I cannot breathe. Mark, the air in here. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 is greater than it feels thick with dander. She collapsed onto the armchair. The one I had just spent $200 professionally cleaning. Margaret, can I get you some water? I asked. Rushing forward, she recoiled from me as if I were holding a knife. No, just Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 is greater than get me away from here. Mark, my inhaler. Mark turned to me, his eyes blazing with fury. Look at what you are doing to her. Rose, she is having a panic attack. Are you happy now? Is your dog worth my mother's life? I stood there, frozen, watching the performance. Part of my brain, the logical part, noticed that Margaret's color was fine, that her wheezing sounded theatrical. But the other part of me, the part that had been beaten down by a week of ruined furniture and shredded clothes, crumbled. I am sorry, I stammered, tears stinging my eyes. I did not mean to. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. R. Jing Hao Dayu. Mark guided his mother toward the door. We are leaving. I am taking her to a hotel. I cannot let her stay in this death trap. He stopped at the door and looked back at me. The look on his face was not love. It was disappointment. You have a choice to make. Rose, by the time I come back tomorrow, I want to know where your priorities lie. The past or the future. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear Buster scratching gently at the guest room door, wanting to be let out. I walked over and opened it. He looked up at me, his tail giving a tentative wag. I sat down on the floor and hugged him, burying my face in his neck. But for the first time in 6 years, hugging him did not make me feel better. It made me feel guilty. It made me feel selfish. Mark was right. I thought, I am destroying this family before it even begins. I did not know then that the mud on the sofa had been smeared by human hands. I did not know that the blouse had been cut with scissors. I only knew that I was losing my mind, and I was willing to do anything to stop the world from spinning. The invitation was for a family dinner at the Oakhurst, a steakhouse in the suburbs that smelled of old money, in Argol, and roasted meat. Mark told me it was a celebration of our engagement, a chance for his extended family to officially welcome me into the fold. But as I walked toward the private dining room at the back of the restaurant, my heels sinking into the thick crimson carpet, I did not feel like a guest of honor. I felt like a defendant walking into a courtroom. The room was dimly lit by amber sconces on the walls. A long oval table dominated the space, set with heavy silverware and crystal glasses that caught the flickering candlelight. Around the table sat the tribunal. Mark, his mother Margaret, his Aunt Linda, and 2 cousins whose names I always struggled to remember. They stopped talking the moment I entered. Rose, darling, you are finally here, Margaret said. She remained seated, offering me a cheek that smelled of lavender and something medicinal. Her skin was powdery and cold. She looked frail tonight, wrapped in a knitted shawl despite the warmth of the room. It was a stark contrast to the woman who had stormed out of my apartment just days ago. I am sorry we are late, I said, taking my seat next to Mark. Traffic on the Kennedy was a nightmare. Mark placed a hand on my knee under the table. His grip was firm, possessive. He leaned in and whispered, "Just relax. They just want to get to know you." The first course arrived, lobster bisque, but nobody seemed interested in eating. The clinking of spoons against bowls was the only sound in the room for several agonizing minutes. I could feel their eyes on me, dissecting my dress, my hair, and the invisible weight of the decision I had not yet made. So, Rose, Aunt Linda began. She was a larger version of Margaret, with the same critical eyes, but a sharper tongue. Mark tells us you are still hesitating about the living arrangements. I paused with my spoon halfway to my mouth. I lowered it slowly. It is not the living arrangements. Linda, I said, keeping my voice steady. It is about Buster. He is my family too. I have had him for 6 years. Margaret let out a long, shuddering sigh. She placed a hand over her heart and looked up at the ceiling as if asking for strength. Family, Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. You compare a beast to family. I suppose that explains a lot about your priorities. Dear, when I was your age, family meant blood. It meant sacrifice. Mrs. Peterson, I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Please, call me Margaret, if you are going to be my daughter-in-law. Though, I wonder if you truly want to be. I told Mark yesterday. I said, Mark, maybe she just does not love you enough. Maybe she prefers the company of animals because they do not require her to grow up. The words were soft, but they hit me like stones. I looked at Mark, expecting him to defend me, expecting him to say that I loved him more than anything. Instead, he looked down at his soup, his jaw tight. Mom is just emotional. Rose, Mark said quietly, not meeting my eyes. She had another episode last night. Her blood pressure spiked. The doctor said stress is literally killing her. The guilt washed over me, thick and suffocating. I looked around the table. The cousins were shaking their heads. Aunt Linda looked at me with open disdain. I was the villain in their narrative. I was the selfish city girl endangering a fragile old woman for the sake of a pet. I do not want to hurt anyone, I said, my voice cracking. I just, Saoyudzing Haling, 2 hash is greater than I do not know what to do with him. I cannot just put him in a shelter. He is 6 years old. No one adopts 6-year-old dogs. They would put him down. The room went silent. This was the opening they had been waiting for. Mark turned to me. His face softened, shifting from the stern judge to the loving partner. He took both of my hands in his. Rose, listen to me. We would never ask you to put Buster in a shelter. We are not monsters. He signaled to Aunt Linda, who reached into her purse and pulled out a photo. She slid it across the tablecloth toward me. It was a picture of a sprawling green pasture with a red barn in the distance. It looked idyllic. This is my sister Alice's place, Margaret said, her voice suddenly stronger. She lives 3 hours west of here. She has 40 acres of land, fenced in, safe. She has taken in rescue dogs before. They run free all day. Rose, they chase rabbits. They sleep in a heated barn. It is heaven for a dog like yours. I picked up the photo. It did look beautiful. Much better than my apartment. Much better than a crate in a basement. Alice? I asked. I did not know you had a sister named Alice. We do not talk much, Margaret said quickly, dabbing her dry eyes with a napkin. She is the black sheep. She prefers animals to people, just like you, actually, but she has agreed to take the dog, for Mark's sake, and for mine. Mark squeezed my hands tighter. Think about it, Rose. Buster is miserable in the city. You saw how he destroyed the sofa. He is acting out, because he is bored and cramped. At Aunt Alice's farm, he would be free. And we, Sao Yu Junhao Ling, 2 hash is greater than we could finally start our life. We could buy the house. We could have the baby. Sao Yu Junhao Ling. Dva. Baby. The word hung in the air. Mark had never spoken so directly about having a child before. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at his hopeful face, then at Margaret's expectant gaze. I realized then that this was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum wrapped in a gift box. "Can I visit him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Of course," Mark said immediately. His smile returned, dazzling and relieved. "We can drive out there on weekends. You can see him whenever you want. It is the best of both worlds. Rose, you are not losing him. You are just giving him a better life." I looked down at the photo again. I imagined Buster running through that tall grass, his tongue lolling out, happy and free. Then I thought about the shredded blouse and the muddy sofa. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I was being selfish, keeping him in an apartment. Maybe my love was actually suffocating him. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I brushed it away, angrily. I wanted to be the wife Mark needed. I wanted to be the daughter-in-law Margaret accepted. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of being the outsider. "Okay," I whispered. "What was that?" Aunt Linda asked sharply. I said okay. I repeated, louder this time. "If Aunt Alice will take him." Sao Yu Junhao Ling. 2. Then okay. The tension in the room snapped like a rubber band. Suddenly, everyone was smiling. Waiters appeared as if summoned by magic to pour wine. Margaret reached across the table and patted my hand, her skin feeling like dry parchment. "You made the right choice, dear," she cooed. "You finally decided to grow up. I am so proud of you." Mark kissed me right there at the table. A hard, celebratory kiss. "I love you. Rose, you have made me the happiest man in the world." I smiled back, but the muscles in my face felt stiff as they toasted to our future, to the new house, and to the Peterson family legacy. I felt a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. It felt like I had just signed a contract I did not bother to read. I drank my wine in one long gulp, letting the alcohol burn away the voice in my head that was screaming at me to run. The next morning, the reality of my decision set in with the gray light of dawn. I sat on the floor of my living room, hugging Buster. He sensed something was wrong. He leaned his weight against me, his heavy head resting on my shoulder, letting out those long, mournful sighs that dogs do when the barometer drops. "I am sorry, buddy," I whispered into his soft, golden fur. "You are going to go to a farm. You are going to chase rabbits. It is going to be great. You will see." He licked the salt from my tears off my cheek. Mark came out of the bedroom, dressed for work, looking more energized than I had seen him in months. He was whistling, "Pack his things." "Rose," he said cheerfully, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Aunt Alice is going to be in town this afternoon. She wants to pick him up early so he can get settled before dark. Today?" I scrambled up. "Mark, I thought we had a few days. I have not even said goodbye properly. Best to rip the bandage off," he said, biting into the apple with a loud crunch. "Long goodbyes just confuse the animal. And besides, the movers are coming to look at your furniture tomorrow. We need the apartment clear." He checked his watch. "I have a meeting. Have him ready by 3 o'clock. Leave the key under the mat for her." "Wait," I said. "I want to meet her. I want to be here when she takes him." "Rose, do not make this harder than it needs to be." Mark said, his voice taking on that patronizing edge again. You will be a mess. You will cry. The dog will get upset, and Alice will feel awkward. Let me handle the logistics. You go to work. Go design a beautiful kitchen for someone. When you come home, we will go out for a nice dinner. Just the two of us. He kissed me on the forehead, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out of the door. I stood there in the silence of my apartment. 3 o'clock. I had 6 hours left with my best friend. I called in sick to work. I spent the day lying on the floor with Buster. I fed him a steak I had been saving for a special occasion. We went for a long walk by the lake. Even though it was drizzling, I memorized the way his ears bounced when he trotted, the specific pattern of the white fur on his chest, the smell of him, like corn chips and rain. At 2:45 in the afternoon, I packed his favorite bed, his bag of food, and the stuffed hedgehog he loved. I wrote a 3-page letter to Aunt Alice, detailing his feeding schedule, his fear of thunderstorms, and how he liked to be scratched right behind the left ear. At 2:45, I put his leash on. He wagged his tail, thinking we were going for another walk. I am sorry, I choked out. I am so sorry. I could not do it. I could not be there when he was taken away. Mark was right about one thing. I was weak. I was a coward. I left the key under the mat. I left Buster in the hallway with his things. I kissed his nose one last time, and then I ran. I ran to the elevator, tears blinding me. I could hear him barking as the doors closed. A confused, rhythmic bark. Woof, woof. The sound echoed in the shaft as I descended. It was the sound of betrayal. I sat in a coffee shop across the street for 2 hours, staring at the entrance of my building, waiting to see a woman with a truck come and take him. But I never saw anyone. I just sat there, my phone clutched in my hand, waiting for a text from Mark saying it was done. At 5 o'clock, the text came. He is with Alice. He is fine. Stop worrying. I love you. I stared at the screen. I should have felt relief. I should have felt happy that my marriage was secure. Instead, I felt a hollow, aching emptiness in my chest, as if I had just cut off my own arm to save a relationship that suddenly felt very, very cold. I did not know it then, but I had just passed the point of no return. I had sacrificed the only living thing that loved me unconditionally, and I had handed him over to a ghost. The silence of the apartment was not peaceful. It was violent. When I unlocked the door that evening, I instinctively braced myself for the weight of a 60-pound body slamming against my legs. I waited for the happy whine, the frantic tail wagging that sounded like a drumbeat against the wall. But there was nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint, tinny sound of the television from the living room. I walked in, my steps echoing too loudly on the hardwood. The hallway felt cavernous. I looked at the corner where his bed used to be. The floor was clean, too clean. Mark had not just removed the dog. He had erased him, the water bowl, the basket of toys, the leash hook by the door, all gone. It was as if Buster had never existed. I walked into the living room. Mark was sitting on the sofa, the one I had scrubbed the mud off of just days before, watching a basketball game. He had a beer in one hand and his feet propped up on the coffee table. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had just finished a long project and was finally enjoying the weekend. You are home, he said, not looking away from the screen. There is leftover Thai food in the fridge if you are hungry. I stood there, clutching my purse, my throat feeling like it was stuffed with cotton. How did it go? I asked. With Aunt Alice? Mark took a sip of his beer. Smooth. She is a nice lady. Very brisk. She took one look at him and said he has good bones. Said he will make a great farm dog. Did he? Sauiting howling. 2 hashes greater than did he look for me. Mark finally turned to look at me. His expression was flat, devoid of empathy. Rose, do not do this. Do not torture yourself. He hopped right into her truck. He did not even look back. He is a dog, not a child. He lives in the moment. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. Buster always looked back. Always. Can I call her? I asked, dropping my purse and sitting on the edge of the armchair. I just want to thank her, and maybe hear how he is settling in. Mark Seahill. A long, exaggerated sound of irritation. He paused the game. Rose, it has been 3 hours. Let the woman breathe. She drove 3 hours to get here and 3 hours back. She is probably asleep. I just want her number. Mark, I will not call tonight. I will call tomorrow. I do not have it on me, he said dismissively, turning back to the television. It is in my old phone contact list. I will dig it up later. You arranged the pickup today. You must have texted her. Mark slammed the remote down on the cushion. The sudden violence of the movement made me flinch. Why are you being so obsessive? He snapped, his voice rising. I handled it. I solved the problem. I saved our relationship. I saved my mother's health. And I found a paradise for your mutt. And instead of saying thank you, Mark, or I love you, Mark, you are grilling me like I am a criminal. You are being hysterical. Rose, hysterical, the word hung in the air like a slap. I am not hysterical. I said, my voice trembling, I am grieving. I just gave away my best friend. You are acting like a child. He sneered. This is exactly why my mother worries about you. You are emotionally unstable. If you are going to be this dramatic over a dog, how are you going to handle a baby? How are you going to handle real life? He stood up and loomed over me. I need a wife who is an adult. If you are going to sulk and cry and make me the bad guy, then maybe we need to rethink this wedding. Maybe you are not ready for the life I am offering you. The threat paralyzed me. The fear of losing him, of the wedding being canceled, of being alone again, seized my throat. I shrank back into the chair. I am sorry, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. I am just sauiting howling. 2 hashes greater than tired. Then go to sleep, he said coldly, and stop talking about the dog. It is done. I went to the bedroom, but I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The silence was deafening. Every creak of the building sounded like Buster's paws. I reached out to the empty spot on the rug where he usually slept, my hand grasping at nothing but cold air. Something was wrong. The feeling started in my gut. A cold, slithering snake of suspicion. He did not even look back. That was a lie. I knew it in my bones. And why would not Mark give me the number? Why was he so defensive? I needed someone sane. I needed someone who was not inside this suffocating bubble with me. I grabbed my phone and went into the bathroom, locking the door and turning on the shower to drown out my voice. I dialed my sister, Sarah. Sarah was the opposite of me. She was a divorce attorney in New York, a woman who ate sharks for breakfast and had a heart made of Kevlar. She picked up on the second ring. It is 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. Rose, either someone is dead or you are having a crisis. He made me give up Buster. I choked out, sliding down the bathroom wall until I hit the cold tiles. What? Sarah's voice sharpened instantly. Who made you? Mark? The golden boy? His mother is allergic. Psychologically allergic. They made me send him to a farm. Mark's Aunt Alice took him. Rose? Slow down, Sarah commanded. Start from the beginning. Who is Aunt Alice? I told her everything. The mud on the sofa, the shredded blouse, the ultimatum, the sudden pickup today while I was gone, the way Mark refused to give me the phone number. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Rose, Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave, sounding deadly serious. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Does Mark have a sister? No, he is an only child. Does his mother have a sister? Yes. She said her name is Alice. The black sheep lives on a farm 3 hours west. Okay, Sarah said. And you have never met her? Never seen a picture of her, other than a photo of a barn? Sauiting Holling, due cancelletto, è maggiore di no. And Mark will not give you her number? He said it is on his old phone. Rose, Sarah said, that is a lie. Nobody organizes a logistics pickup without a current contact number. And nobody drives 6 hours round trip for a stranger's dog without speaking to the owner. What are you saying? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. I am saying that I have been a divorce lawyer for 10 years. I know when a man is cleaning house. Sarah paused. Send me the address of this farm. Ask him for the address. Tell him you want to send a thank you card. If he refuses, or if he stalls, Saoyu Jing Haoling, Coxie, Rose. I think something bad has happened. He would not hurt Buster, I said, tears streaming down my face. He loves me. He is doing this for us. He is doing this for control. Sarah snapped. I am going to run a background check on the Petersons. All of them, tonight, but you need to find out where that dog is. Because my gut tells me Aunt Alice does not exist. I hung up the phone. I sat on the bathroom floor. The steam from the shower filling the room, but I felt freezing cold. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face blotchy. Sarah was wrong. She had to be wrong. She was cynical. She saw the worst in everyone. Mark was my fiancé. He was the man who held my hand at the movies. He was the man who wanted to build a nursery. But as I turned off the shower and unlocked the door, the doubt was no longer a snake. It was a monster, consuming me from the inside out. I walked back into the bedroom. Mark was asleep, snoring softly. His phone was on the nightstand, glowing faintly as it charged. I stood over him, watching him sleep. For the first time, his face did not look peaceful to me. It looked like a mask that had been set down for the night. I needed to know. I needed to find Aunt Alice. Because if Sarah was right, Saoyu Haoling, 2# is greater than if Buster was not on a farm chasing rabbits. Saoyu Haoling, R. Jinghao Dayu. Then I was sleeping next to a monster. The phone call that ended my life. Or at least, the life I thought I was living. Came at 10 in the morning. I was sitting at my desk at the design firm, staring blindly at a blueprint for a kitchen island, my hand hovering over a mouse that I had not moved in 20 minutes. It was Sarah. I found him, she said. Her voice was not triumphant. It was flat, heavy with a kind of pity that made my stomach turn over. Is he at the farm? I asked, gripping the phone. Is he okay? Rose, listen to me, Sarah said. There is no farm. There is no Aunt Alice. I ran a full skip trace on Margaret Peterson. She was an only child. Her parents died in 1985. She has no siblings. The world tilted on its axis. The blueprint in front of me blurred. That Sao Jing Hao Ling 2 hash is greater than that is impossible. I stammered. Mark said, Sao Jing Hao Ling Ar Jing Har Dayu. Mark lead. Sarah cut in, her voice sharp as a scalpel. I checked Mark's Venmo history. I have a friend in digital forensics. Yesterday at 2 o'clock, right before you came home to an empty apartment, Mark received a payment of $500. $500? I whispered. The payment was from a user named Miller Creek Kennels. I looked them up. It is not a sanctuary. Rose. It is a high-volume breeding facility in Joliet. A puppy mill. The air left my lungs. A puppy mill. The kind of place I had seen in nightmares, where dogs lived in wire cages and never touched the grass. Mark had not sent Buster to a paradise. He had sold him. He had sold my best friend for $500. The price of a cheap suit. Send me the address. I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was not the voice of the crying woman from last night. It was the voice of someone who had nothing left to lose. I walked out of the office without saying a word to my boss. I got into my car and drove. The drive to Joliet took 45 minutes. The scenery shifted from the steel skyline of Chicago to gray industrial parks and finally to flat, desolate fields. Miller Creek Kennels was a collection of corrugated metal sheds at the end of a long gravel driveway. Even from the car, with the windows rolled up, I could hear the barking. It was a cacophony of misery. I stepped out of the car. The smell hit me instantly. A thick, stinging stench of ammonia, wet fur, and feces. A man in dirty coveralls walked out of the main shed, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at my Audi, then at my heels, and spat on the ground. Can I help you? Lady, you bought a golden retriever yesterday, I said, walking toward him, 6 years old. His name is Buster. The man narrowed his eyes. I buy a lot of dogs. What is it to you? I am the owner, I said, pulling out my phone. I showed him a picture of Buster. And if you do not take me to him right now, I will call the police, the Animal Control Board, and every news station in Chicago. I will burn this place to the ground with legal fees. He studied my face. He must have seen something in my eyes, a desperation that bordered on violence, because he shrugged and jerked his thumb toward the shed behind him. Suit yourself. He is in run 4. He is a little skittish. Was gonna use him for stud service next week. I walked past him into the shed. The noise was deafening. Rows of wire cages stacked on top of each other lined the walls. Eyes stared out at me from the shadows. Sad eyes, mad eyes, broken eyes. I found him in the last cage on the left. Buster was curled into a tight ball in the corner, pressing himself against the cold metal mesh. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. His beautiful golden coat was matted with mud and filth. Buster, I whispered. His ears twitched. He lifted his head slowly. When he saw me, he did not wag his tail. He let out a low, heartbreaking whimper and crawled toward the front of the cage on his belly, as if he was afraid he would be hit. I unlatched the door and fell to my knees in the dirt. He buried his head in my chest, his whole body heaving with sobs. I held him, rocking back and forth, feeling his ribs against my arms. He smelled like urine and fear. I have got you. I sobbed into his fur. I am so sorry. I have got you. I led him out to the car. He scrambled into the back seat and curled up on the floor, refusing to look out the window. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked at the rearview mirror. I saw my own reflection. My mascara was running. My hair was a mess. But my eyes were dry now. The tears had stopped. In that moment, Rose the fiancé died. The woman who wanted to please everyone. The woman who apologized for taking up space. The woman who believed in fairy tales. She died in the mud of that puppy mill. I called Sarah. I have him, I said. My voice was ice cold. Thank God. Sarah breathed. Bring him to my friend's place in the city. She runs a private boarding house. He will be safe there. Mark will never find him. Okay, I said. Rose, Sarah said softly. What are you going to do? I looked at the text message that had just popped up on my phone screen. It was from Mark. Hey babe, thinking about you. Cannot wait for dinner tonight. Love you. I stared at the words. Love you. It was a weapon. He used love to blind me, to rob me, to break me. He thought he had won. He thought I was the stupid, compliant little woman who would mourn her dog for a week and then gratefully buy him a mansion. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I am going to go home. I told Sarah, Rose, you cannot go back there. He is a sociopath. I have to go back. I said, starting the engine. We have a house to buy. We have a wedding to plan. Sao yu ting hao ling. Coxie, Rose. He took my dog. Sarah. He tried to break my spirit. If I leave now, I just walk away. But if I stay, Sao yu ting hao ling. 2# is greater than I watched the gray sheds of the puppy mill fade in the rearview mirror. If I stay, I can take everything from him. I can make him feel exactly as small and helpless as he made Buster feel. You are scaring me, Sarah said. Good, I replied. Then maybe I will scare him too. I dropped Buster off at the safe house. I bathed him, fed him, and kissed his head until he finally fell asleep. Then, I drove back to the apartment. I checked my face in the mirror before I went inside. I fixed my makeup. I put on a smile. It was a porcelain smile. Hard, shiny, and completely fake. I unlocked the door. Mark was in the kitchen, cooking pasta. He turned and smiled at me. That dazzling, perfect smile. Hey, honey, how was work? I walked over to him. I put my arms around his neck and kissed him. I tasted the wine on his lips. I felt his heart beating against my chest. A steady, confident rhythm of a man who thought he was untouchable. It was great. I lead, looking straight into his eyes. I was just thinking, Sao Jing Ha Ling, 2# is greater than you were right. About everything. The dog, the house. I am ready to move forward. Mark, let us send the deposit for the mansion. Mark's eyes lit up with greed. He hugged me tight. I knew you would come around, he whispered. I rested my chin on his shoulder, my eyes wide open, staring at the empty corner where my dog used to sleep. Enjoy it while it lasts. Mark, I thought, because I am going to burn your world down. The apartment felt different now. It was no longer a home. It was a stage, and I was performing the role of a lifetime. I sat across from Mark at our dining table, watching him twirl spaghetti around his fork. He ate with a robust, satisfied appetite, the kind that belongs to a man who believes he has successfully conquered his world. I took a sip of wine. It was a dry Cabernet that tasted like copper in my mouth. Every time I looked at his hands, those manicured, capable hands, I saw the wire cage. I saw the dirt floor of the puppy mill. I saw him handing over $500 in exchange for the soul of my best friend. So, Mark said, wiping tomato sauce from his lip with a napkin. I called the realtor. They are thrilled you are finally on board. They were actually about to put the house back on the market, but I convinced them to hold it for us. I told them my fiancé just needed a little moment to process the change. He smiled at me, a benevolent king forgiving a foolish subject. I forced the muscles of my face to lift into a smile. It felt brittle, like it might crack and bleed at any second. You were right, Mark, I said softly. I was being selfish. I see that now. A house in Lake Forest is a much better investment for our future. And your mother? Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hashes greater than she deserves to be comfortable. Mark reached across the table and squeezed my hand. His skin was warm. It made my flesh crawl. I am proud of you. Rose, it takes a big person to admit when they are wrong. Mom will be so relieved. She was really worried about your mental state. You know, she thought you were having a breakdown. I lowered my eyes, staring at the white tablecloth. Oh, I was having a breakdown. Mark, just not the one you think. I just want to make this work. I said, I want to build that nursery you talked about. Mark's eyes gleamed. He stood up, energized. Well, in that case, let us not waste another second. I have the paperwork right here. He walked to his briefcase, which was sitting on the kitchen counter, and pulled out a thick stack of documents held together by a black binder clip. He dropped the pile onto the dining table with a heavy thud. The contract, he announced. I blinked. That was fast. I wanted to be prepared, he said, shrugging. I had my friend Jason draft it up. He is a real estate attorney. It is just standard boilerplate stuff. We can sign it tonight. I will scan it, and we can wire the deposit in the morning. He flipped the document open to the last page, pointing to a line marked purchaser. Just sign here. And here, he said, handing me a pen. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was not even going to let me read it. The arrogance was breathtaking. Mark, I said, keeping my voice light and airy, this is the biggest purchase of our lives. I cannot just sign the last page. I want to read it. You know how I am with details. It is the designer in me. Mark's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A shadow of annoyance passed over his eyes. Rose, it is 40 pages of legal jargon. It just says we are buying the house. The address is 127 Oak Lane, and the price is $1.2 million. Trust me, Jason knows what he is doing. I picked up the document, weighing it in my hands. I trust you. Mark, I lead, but I promised my father before he died that I would never sign anything I did not read. It is a superstition. Please, it will only take me 20 minutes. I will take it into the study, so I do not bore you. Mark hesitated. He looked at the clock on the wall, then back at me. He was calculating. If he pushed too hard, I might get suspicious. If he let me go, he risked me finding something. But he was confident. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was just a girl who picked out throw pillows for a living. Fine, he said, pouring himself another glass of wine. But hurry up. We need to celebrate. I took the documents into the study and closed the door. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the papers. I immediately locked the door and pulled out my phone. I sat on the floor, hidden behind the desk, and began snapping photos of every single page. Page 1, click. Page 2, click. I sent them in a batch to Sarah. Read this. Now, he wants me to sign tonight. I waited, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The silence in the study was oppressive. I could hear Mark in the living room, humming to himself. He was already spending my money in his head. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Do not sign this." I typed back, "Why? What is it?" Sarah's response came in a flurry of texts. "Look at page 12, clause 4b, title and ownership." I flipped frantically to page 12. The legal language was dense, designed to be boring, designed to make your eyes glaze over. But there it was. The property located at 127 Oak Lane shall be titled solely in the name of Mark Anthony Peterson. The secondary party, Rosemary Miller, acknowledges that her financial contribution of $200,000 is a non-equity gift toward the down payment and grants her no rights of ownership or tenancy. I read it twice, then a third time. Sao Jing Hal Ling, Tuo, a gift. He was not just trying to buy a house with me. He was trying to take my entire life savings, $200,000 that I had scraped together over 10 years of working 80-hour weeks, and turn it into a donation. If we divorced, or if he simply kicked me out the day after the wedding, I would leave with nothing. No house, no money, no legal standing. He was planning to steal everything. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put my head between my knees. It was not just greed, it was malice. He looked at me every day, slept in my bed, ate my food, and all the while he was constructing a trap to leave me destitute. My phone buzzed again. "Sarah, he is trying to screw you. Rose, legally and financially. If you sign that, you are gifting him the down payment. He could evict you the next day. Also, I looked up the property records for that address. The owner of record is not a stranger. It is Peterson Family Trust. He is buying the house from his own parents." I covered my mouth to stifle a scream. The puzzle pieces slammed together. The mansion belonged to Margaret. They were losing it to the bank. So they concocted a scheme to have me pay off their debt, keep the house in their name, and trap me as a tenant in a home I paid for. They were not a family. They were a pack of wolves. "Rose?" Mark's voice came through the door. "You okay in there? It has been 20 minutes. I jumped. I quickly shoved the phone into my pocket and smoothed down my skirt. I needed to go back out there. I needed to look him in the eye and not claw his face off. I opened the door. Mark was standing right there, leaning against the frame, his arms crossed. "Well?" he asked. "Did you find any typos?" I walked past him into the living room, placing the contract back on the table. I kept my back to him for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady my voice. "It looks very thorough," I said. "So you will sign?" He held out the pen again. I turned and looked at him. I looked at the man I had planned to grow old with. I saw the slight sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He was nervous. He needed this money. "There is just one small problem." "Mark," I said, his brow furrowed. "Problème?" I pointed to the transfer amount. $200,000. That is all of my liquid savings. "Mark, I have it in a high-yield investment account, not a checking account. So?" "And transfer it. It takes 2 seconds on the app." I shook my head, feigning a look of frustration. I wish it were that simple, but because of the fraud protection limits on my account, any transfer over $50,000 requires a 3-day verification period. The bank has to call me, verify my identity, and clear the funds. It is a security measure. Mark's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. 3 days? He snapped. "We do not have 3 days. Rose, the sellers want the deposit tomorrow. If we do not wire it by noon, they are going to accept another offer. I widened my eyes, looking innocent and helpless. But what can I do? Mark, I cannot force the bank to move faster, unless Xiaoyijing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than do you have the money? Can you put it down? And I will pay you back next week? Mark stiffened. I knew he did not have the money. He probably did not have $2,000, let alone 200,000. Xiaoyijing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than my assets are tied up in the market right now. He stammered, his eyes darting around the room. I cannot liquidate them without taking a huge tax hit. This is the plan. Rose, you put down the deposit. I handle the monthly mortgage payments. That was the deal. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. This is a disaster. My mother is going to be devastated. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes narrowing. Are you lying to me? Are you trying to back out again? My heart raced. This was the moment. If I flinched, he would know. I walked over to him and placed my hands on his chest. I looked up at him with total adoration. Mark, I love you. I want this house more than anything. I want to live there with you and your mother. I have already initiated the transfer request on my phone in the study, but we have to wait for the bank. It is just bureaucratic red tape. I paused, then added the cherry on top. Besides, I already packed up the rest of my apartment. I am ready to go. Why would I lie? Mark searched my face. He was looking for the crack, for the hesitation, but all he saw was the reflection of his own manipulation. I was giving him exactly what he wanted to see. A compliant, eager victim. He let out a long breath and slumped his shoulders. Okay, fine. 3 days. I can stall the sellers. I will tell them. Xiaoyijing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than I will tell them. There was a wire error. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight enough to bruise. But Monday morning, Rose, Monday morning, that money needs to move. Do you understand? This is our future. Do not mess this up. I understand. I whispered. He kissed me. It was a hard, possessive kiss. I stood there and let him do it, my mind drifting back to the cold metal cage in Joliet. Monday morning, I thought. By Monday morning, Mark, you will not be worrying about a house. You will be worrying about why your entire life is crumbling into dust. I pulled away and smiled. Let us go to bed. Mark, we have a big week ahead of us. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air was thick with the threat of a storm, the kind of heavy, static atmosphere that makes the hair on your arms stand up. I told Mark I had to go into the office for a few hours to finish a rush project for a client. He did not even look up from his iPad. He was too busy scrolling through listings for luxury cars, likely spending the commission he thought he was about to make off my life savings. I did not go to the office. Instead, I drove north, merging onto the highway toward Lake Forest. Lake Forest is a place where money does not shout. It whispers. It is a town of winding roads, ancient oak trees, and estates hidden behind 10-foot hedges. It is beautiful, intimidating, and exactly the kind of place where secrets rot behind velvet drapes. I pulled my car to the curb a block away from 127 Oak Lane. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My heart was not racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy thud, like a war drum. I walked toward the house. It was a sprawling Tudor-style mansion with timber framing and intricate brickwork. From a distance, it looked majestic, but as I got closer, the illusion began to crumble. The ivy climbing the walls was brown and dying. The gutters were choked with months of debris. The grass, though cut, was patchy and yellowing. It looked like a fading beauty queen who had run out of money for makeup. I walked up the driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel. I needed to see if anyone was home. I needed to see who actually lived here. "Excuse me." I turned. A woman was standing at the edge of the property line next door. She was wearing a beige cashmere tracksuit and holding the leash of a meticulously groomed standard poodle. She looked me up and down with narrowed eyes. "Are you at the bank?" she asked. I blinked, taken aback. "The bank or the auction house?" she continued, stepping closer. "Because if you are here to serve another notice, you should know they never answer the door before noon. They keep the lights off to make it look empty." I forced a polite smile. "No, I am not with the bank. I am actually saluting Haling. 2 hash is greater than looking at the property. I was told it might be for sale." The woman let out a sharp, barking laugh. "For sale? Honey, this house has been in pre-foreclosure for 6 months. The Petersons have been trying to offload it since last winter, but nobody will touch it with the liens they have on it." The name hit me like a physical blow. The Petersons. "So, Margaret Peterson lives here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Margaret and her husband, Frank," the woman said, leaning in as if eager to share the neighborhood gossip. "Though Frank has been hiding out mostly gambling debts. If you believe the rumors, they are desperate. I heard the sheriff is scheduled to come for an eviction in 30 days if they do not come up with the arrears." She paused, looking at me with a sudden flash of pity. "Wait, are you a buyer? Did they try to sell this to you?" I swallowed hard. "They offered it to me for $1.2 million. The woman's eyes widened. 1.2? This place was appraised at $600,000 last year, and that was before the basement flooded. They are trying to rob you blind. Sweetheart, run, run far away." I thanked her and walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the house. It was all a lie, every single word. The dream home was a sinking ship. They were not moving Margaret in with us because she was lonely. They were moving us in with her because they were about to be homeless. They were going to take my $200,000, pay off the bank to stop the foreclosure, and then we would all be trapped in this decaying mausoleum together. I would be the tenant, the maid, and the bankroll while they lived off my labor. I drove back to the city in a trance. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. I felt like a coroner examining a corpse. The relationship was dead. Now, I just needed to determine the cause of death so I could sign the death certificate. I stopped at a liquor store on the way home and bought a bottle of Macallan 18-year scotch. It cost $300. It was Mark's favorite, an investment. I told myself. When I got home, the apartment smelled of Mark's cologne. He was in the living room, watching golf. "I brought you a surprise," I said, setting the bottle on the coffee table. Mark's eyes lit up. "Macallan 18? Wow, what is the occasion?" I sat down next to him, close enough to smell the stale coffee on his breath. "I was just thinking about how stressful this week has been." I lead, running a hand up his arm. "You have worked so hard to make this deal happen. You deserve to relax. We both do." Mark smiled, that arrogant, self-satisfied smile that I used to mistake for confidence. "You are right, babe. I have been carrying a lot of weight. It is nice to see you finally appreciating that. I poured him a glass, a generous one, then another. I sipped my own drink slowly, barely wetting my lips, while Mark drained glass after glass. The alcohol loosened his tongue. He started talking about the future, but his mask was slipping. We are going to be kings in that town. Rose, he slurred, gesturing with his glass. Those snobs in Lake Forest. Sao Tsing Hao Lin. 2 hashes greater than they think they are better than us. But once we have the house, Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than once we have the cash flow. Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than we will show them. We? I asked softly. Me and you, and my mom. It is all about legacy. Rose, you do not understand, because Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than well. Your family was different, but the Petersons, Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than we are meant for greatness. He laughed, a cruel, wet sound. You are lucky I picked you. You know that most guys, Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than they want a model, or 20-something. But I saw potential in you. I knew you could be molded. I gripped my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Molded, like clay, like a dog being trained. By 10 o'clock, Mark was passed out on the sofa. His mouth was open, and a line of drool ran down his chin onto the expensive throw pillow. He looked pathetic. I waited 5 minutes to make sure he was deep in the sleep of the heavily intoxicated. Then, I reached into his pocket. His phone was warm. I knew the passcode. 4488. His birthday. Of course it was his birthday. I unlocked it. The screen was bright in the dim room. I navigated to his text messages. There were the usual threads. His mother, his lawyer friend Jason, a few buddies. But then I saw it. A thread pinned to the top, under the name Project Alpha. I opened it. The messages went back months. The sender was a woman named Jessica. Jessica, when is the wire coming? Mark, my landlord, is threatening to kick us out. Mark, relax. Babe, the idiot is transferring the money on Monday. Just hold tight, Jessica. I am tired of waiting. Leo keeps asking where Daddy is, and his asthma is getting worse in this moldy apartment. Mark, I know. I am doing this for Leo. Once she signs the papers and we get the title cleared, I will move you guys into the East Wing. We will tell her you are my cousin from out of state who needs a crash pad. Jessica, are you sure she will not mind? What about the dog? You know Leo enters anaphylactic shock if he touches dog dander. I froze. Mark, the dog is gone. Sold it to a mill yesterday. Problem solved. She cried for a day, but she is over it. She is desperate to marry me. She will believe anything I say. Jessica, good. I do not want that beast near my son. Just make sure the check clears before you dump her. Mark, I am not going to dump her. Jess, we need her income. She makes 6 figures. She is going to pay the mortgage, cook the meals, and clean the house. You and I get the master suite. She can stay in the guest room once we are married. It is the perfect setup. I dropped the phone on the rug. I felt like I was going to vomit. It was not just cheating. It was not just theft. It was slavery. He intended to marry me, steal my money, move his mistress and secret child into my home, and turn me into a live-in servant to support them all. And the dog, Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than Buster did not have to leave because of Margaret. He had to leave because Mark's secret son had allergies. He had sacrificed my dog to pave the way for his other family. I looked at Mark, snoring on the sofa, a monster in a navy suit. I picked up the phone again. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From adrenaline, I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I took screenshots of everything. The texts about the money, the texts about the house, the texts calling me an idiot, the photos of a dark-haired boy who looked exactly like Mark. I emailed everything to myself. Then I emailed it to Sarah. Then I saved it to a hidden cloud drive. I deleted the sent emails from his phone. I wiped the application history. I walked back into the living room and slid the phone back into his pocket. I stood over him for a long time. I imagined picking up the heavy crystal bottle of Macallan and smashing it over his head. It would be so easy, but that would be too quick. That would be mercy. No, I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel the humiliation of losing everything when he thought he had won. I wanted to strip him bare in front of the very people he tried to impress. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the $300 scotch down the sink. Then I went to my laptop and opened the folder for the engagement party. It was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. 100 guests, his entire family, all of his friends. I opened the slideshow presentation I had prepared, a montage of our happiest moments. I hit delete. Then I began to upload new files. Image 1, the foreclosure notice for 127 Oak Lane. Image 2, the text calling me an idiot. Image 3, the text confirming the sale of Buster. Image 4, the photo of Jessica and Leo. I worked through the night, editing, cropping, and timing the transitions perfectly to the music. The song was From This Moment On. Mark had chosen it. By the time the sun came up, painting the sky in shades of violent orange, I was finished. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was pink and raw, trying to wash away the feeling of his touch. I put on my engagement dress. It was white, pure, innocent. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was terrifying. Her eyes were dead, but her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Mark woke up around 10, groaning, holding his head. He moaned. What happened? We celebrated, I said brightly, handing him a glass of water and 2 aspirin. You were so happy. Mark, you talked all about our future. He blinked, trying to piece his memory together. Did I? Good, good. He swallowed the pills and looked at me. Are you ready for the party? Mom is going to be there early to supervise the caterers. I am ready, I said. I have never been more ready for anything in my life. Mark smiled, unaware that he was looking at his executioner. Let us go knock them dead. Babe, oh, we will. Mark, I thought, we definitely will. The banquet hall at the Drake Hotel was a sea of cream, silk, and fresh hydrangeas. It was the kind of venue that cost more for a single evening than most people earned in a year. And naturally, I had paid for every single cent of it. The chandeliers overhead cast a golden, flattering light on the 150 guests who buzzed around the open bar, oblivious to the fact that they were attending a funeral, not a celebration. I stood near the entrance in my white cocktail dress, a glass of sparkling water in my hand, watching the Peterson clan circulate. They moved like sharks in a reef. Margaret was holding court near the buffet, draped in a fox fur stole that I knew she had pulled out of storage for the occasion. She was laughing loudly, throwing her head back as she spoke to one of Mark's college friends, likely bragging about the estate in Lake Forest that she did not actually own. Mark was beside me, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. He was vibrating with nervous energy. Every few minutes, he would lean in and whisper in my ear, his breath hot and anxious. Did you initiate the transfer yet, Rose? It is Sunday, but you can cue it for Monday morning. I just want to be sure. I turned to him and smiled, smoothing the lapel of his jacket. I told you, Mark, it is all taken care of. Just enjoy the party. This is your night. He relaxed visibly, his chest puffing out. You are the best, babe. I mean it. We are going to be so happy. He kissed my cheek, leaving a wet mark, and then drifted away to accept congratulations from his fraternity brothers. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a man walk across a bridge that I had already set on fire. The lights dimmed. The chatter in the room softened as the MC, a slick man in a tuxedo whom I had hired for $500, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, please take your seats. We have a special presentation from the bride-to-be to honor this beautiful union. A ripple of applause went through the room. Mark beamed from the front table, raising his glass to me. Margaret clapped politely, her eyes scanning the room to make sure everyone was watching her son. I walked up the 3 steps to the small stage. The spotlight hit me, blindingly bright. I adjusted the microphone stand. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Sarah in the back corner. Near the exit, she gave me a barely perceptible nod. Behind me, the massive projector screen descended from the ceiling. Thank you all for coming, I said. My voice was steady, magnified by the speakers. It echoed slightly in the high-ceilinged room. Tonight is about truth. It is about the foundation of a marriage. Mark and I have been through a lot to get here. We have made sacrifices. I have made sacrifices. And I wanted to share with you all exactly what went into building this. Soyudzing Holing. Deux dièse est supérieur à empire. I pressed the clicker in my hand. The room filled with the opening chords of Shania Twain's From This Moment On. Mark's favorite song. He smiled, looking touched. The first image appeared on the screen. It was not a photo of us kissing in the park. It was a high-resolution scan of a legal document. The header was bold and undeniable. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. Below it, the address, 127 Oak Lane. The borrower names, Frank and Margaret Peterson. The outstanding debt, $1.4 million. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke. Mark's smile froze. He squinted at the screen. I clicked again. The music swelled romantically. The next slide was a screenshot of the text conversation between Mark and Jessica. I had highlighted the specific messages in red. Mark, the idiot is transferring the money on Monday. Just hold tight. Mark, I am not going to dump her. Jess, we need her income. She is going to pay the mortgage, cook the meals, and clean the house. You and I get the master suite. The murmur in the room turned into a gasp. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. I looked at Mark. He was standing up now, his face drained of all color. He looked like a ghost. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Rose, he croaked. I clicked again. The photo of the little boy, Leo, appeared. The resemblance to Mark was uncanny. Next to it, the text, Mark, I am doing this for Leo. Once she signs the papers, Soyudzing Holing, 2 is greater than we will tell her you are my cousin. Margaret let out a shriek. It was a sharp, piercing sound. She clutched her chest, looking around wildly at her friends, who were now staring at her with open mouths. Rose, "Turn it off," Mark yelled, stumbling toward the stage. "Turn it off right now." I did not turn it off. I pressed the button for the video. The music cut out abruptly. The sound that replaced it was the high-pitched, frantic barking of 100 dogs. The video from the puppy mill played. It was shaky, grainy footage, but clear enough. It showed Mark standing in the mud, handing a wad of cash to the man in the dirty coveralls. Then, the camera zoomed in, not on Mark, but on the cage behind him, on Buster, my Buster, cowering in the filth, shaking, looking at Mark as he walked away. The audio from the video played over the speakers. "Man, you sure you do not want to say goodbye? Mark, just get rid of it. I got my money." The silence that fell over the banquet hall was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. I looked down at Mark. He had stopped halfway to the stage. He was staring at the screen, his hands trembling. He knew that everyone in this room, his boss, his clients, his neighbors, had just seen his soul, and it was rotten. I leaned into the microphone. "I would like to propose a toast," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "to Mark Peterson, a man who sells his fiancé's dog for $500, a man who steals his wife's life savings to pay his parents' gambling debts, a man who plans to move his mistress into my home." I raised my glass of sparkling water. "The wedding is off. And Mark," he looked up at me, his eyes wide with terror. "The wire transfer for Monday?" I canceled it. I dropped the microphone. The sound of it hitting the stage floor was a thunderclap. Thud, pandemonium erupted. Mark lunged for me. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, animalistic rage. He was not the smooth corporate climber anymore. He was a cornered rat. "You bitch," he screamed, scrambling up the stairs. "You ruined everything." He reached for my throat, but he never touched me. Two large men in dark suits, security guards Sarah had hired, stepped out from behind the curtains. One of them caught Mark midair, tackling him to the ground with a bone-crushing impact. "Get off me," Mark howled, thrashing against the floor. "Do you know who I am?" Margaret was screaming in the background. She had collapsed onto a chair, fanning herself, wailing about her heart. But nobody was rushing to help her this time. Her friends were backing away, clutching their purses, looking at her with disgust. I stood over Mark as the security guard pinned his arms behind his back. Mark looked up at me, his lip bleeding, his suit jacket torn. "Why?" he spat, tears of frustration streaming down his face. "Why did you do this here? Why not just leave?" I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, just a cold, clean emptiness. "Because, Mark," I said softly, so only he could hear, "you took my voice. You made me doubt my own mind. You made me think I was crazy for loving a dog." I leaned closer. I wanted to make sure that when you tell your side of the story, there is nobody left who will believe you. I turned and walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. Nobody said a word. They just stared, eyes wide, witnessing the aftermath of a natural disaster. I walked past Aunt Linda, who was sitting with her mouth open. I walked past the cousins. I walked past Mark's boss, who was already on his phone, likely calling human resources. I reached the exit where Sarah was waiting. She was holding a leash. At the end of the leash was Buster. He was clean. He was groomed. He was wearing a blue bow tie. When he saw me, he let out a bark that sounded like pure joy. He pulled against the leash, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. I fell to my knees, right there in the doorway of the Drake Hotel. Buster tackled me, licking my face, whining, burying his head in my neck. I held him tight, breathing in his scent. He was safe. I was safe. Let us go home, buddy, I whispered. I stood up, took the leash from Sarah, and walked out of the hotel. I did not look back at the chaos I had left behind. I stepped out into the cool night air of Chicago, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The silence in Sarah's guest room was heavy, but it was not the suffocating silence of my apartment. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the cannons have finally stopped firing. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my white engagement dress, though now it felt more like a shroud than a celebration. Buster lay at my feet, his chin resting heavily on his paws, letting out soft, rhythmic snores that grounded me in reality. I stared at my hands. They were trembling. The adrenaline that had fueled my performance at the Drake was draining out of my body, leaving behind a cold, aching hollow. I had won. I knew that. I had destroyed the man who tried to destroy me. But victory did not feel like triumph. It felt like survival. It felt like crawling out of a car wreck with cuts and bruises, grateful to be alive, but horrified by the twisted metal left behind. Sarah walked into the room, holding 2 mugs of tea. She looked exhausted but fierce, like a general who had just successfully defended the castle. She handed me a mug and sat down in the armchair opposite me. "He is in custody," Sarah said softly. I looked up, blinking slowly. "Custody? Simple assault and battery," Sarah explained, blowing on her tea. When the security guards dragged him out, he took a swing at a police officer who was responding to the disturbance call. "He is spending the night in county lockup. He will be arraigned tomorrow morning." I took a sip of the tea. It was chamomile, but it tasted like nothing. "And his mother?" I asked. Sarah let out a dry, humorless laugh. Margaret made a miraculous recovery the moment the paramedics told her that an ambulance ride would cost $2,000 out of pocket because her insurance had lapsed. She took a cab home, but there is no home to go to. Rose, I felt a pang of something. Not guilt, exactly, but a heavy sadness. I had watched a family disintegrate in real time. The bank changed the locks on the Lake Forest house an hour ago. Sarah continued, checking her phone. The sheriff enforced the eviction notice. Frank and Margaret are apparently staying at a Motel 6 off the interstate. I looked down at Buster. I reached out and buried my hand in his thick fur. He stirred, licking my fingers sleepily. To think that they would have killed his spirit just to keep up appearances in a house they did not even own. It made me sick. My phone, which was sitting on the nightstand, lit up. It was not a text. It was a voicemail notification. I picked it up. The number was blocked, but I knew who it was. "Do not listen to it," Sarah warned. "I have to," I whispered. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. The voice was Mark's, but it was unrecognizable. It was thick with tears and alcohol, a desperate, slurring mess. "Rose, Seo Jinghal Ling, Kaxi. Rose, please. You have to help me." Jessica locked me out. She saw the video. Someone sent her the video. She said she does not want a broke loser. She will not let me see Leo. "Rose, I have nowhere to go. My mom is screaming at me. My boss fired me via text message. I lost everything. Please. Rose, we can fix this. I love you. I only did it for us." I ended the call. I stared at the black screen. I only did it for us. Even now, at rock bottom, he was still lying. He was still trying to manipulate reality to fit his narrative. He did not love me. He loved the safety net I provided. He loved the reflection of himself he saw in my eyes. I deleted the voicemail. Then, I blocked the number. I felt a sudden urge to get the dress off. I stood up and unzipped the white fabric, letting it pool on the floor like a shed skin. I kicked it away. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower, making the water as hot as I could stand. I stood under the spray for a long time, scrubbing my skin until it was red. I wanted to wash away the feeling of his hands on my waist. I wanted to wash away the memory of the past 2 years. I had spent so much time building a life with Mark. I had chosen paint colors. I had named our future children. I had compromised my own instincts again and yet again, chipping away pieces of myself to fit into the mold he created. And for what? To be a bank account? To be a nursemaid? I stepped out of the shower and wrapped myself in a thick towel. I looked in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes shadowed. I looked older. I walked back into the bedroom. Sarah had turned down the lights. "You should sleep," she said gently. I climbed into the bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. Buster jumped up immediately, curling his heavy body against my legs. His warmth was the only real thing in the world. "Sarah," I said into the darkness. "Saoyud Singh Haling, 2 hash is greater than, yeah? I feel Saoyud Singh Haling, 2 hash is greater than empty. I should be happy. I dodged a bullet, but I just feel sad. That is the price of the truth." "Rose," Sarah whispered. "It hurts before it heals, but at least the cancer is cut out. Now you just have to recover from the surgery." I closed my eyes. I listened to the sound of the city outside, the sirens, the cars, the life moving on without me. I thought about Mark in a jail cell. I thought about Margaret in a cheap motel. I thought about the little boy, Leo, who would grow up without a father because that father was a narcissist who destroyed everything he touched. I had saved myself. I had saved my dog. But as sleep finally dragged me under, I realized that saving yourself is a lonely business. The fairy tale was dead. The prince was a villain, and the castle was just a cage with gold bars. 6 months have passed since the night the lights went out on the Peterson dynasty. I am sitting on the patio of my new townhouse in Denver. The air here is thinner, crisper. It smells of pine needles and damp earth, a stark contrast to the exhaust fumes and expensive cologne that defined my life in Chicago. I sold the apartment in the Gold Coast. I sold the emerald dress. I sold every single piece of furniture that Mark had ever sat on. I purged my life of him until there was nothing left but me and the dog he tried to kill. Buster is lying in a patch of sunlight on the deck, his golden coat gleaming. He has gained 10 pounds since the rescue. His eyes, once clouded with the terror of the mill, are bright and clear. He is chewing on a rubber bone with a rhythmic, contented squeak that sounds like music to me. I take a sip of my Chardonnay. It is a cheap bottle, $12 at the local liquor store. But it tastes better than the $300 scotch ever did because I bought it with my own money, for my own enjoyment, in my own house. Sarah calls me once a week with updates. Though I have stopped asking for them, she tells me that the Peterson family imploded with spectacular efficiency. Mark lost his license to sell securities after the fraud allegations surfaced regarding his parents' house. He is currently working as a shift manager at a car rental agency near O'Hare Airport. He lives in a studio apartment above a garage. And Jessica, the mistress with the secret son, Left him the moment the money dried up. Margaret is living in a state-subsidized senior facility. Sarah told me she spends her days telling anyone who will listen that she used to be a socialite, that she was robbed by a vindictive ex-daughter-in-law. Nobody believes her. I look at the mountains in the distance. I used to think that love was a frantic, desperate thing. I thought it was the anxiety of checking a phone, the knot in the stomach when a tone shifted, the constant need to prove I was worthy of being kept. I thought love was a performance. I look down at Buster. He stops chewing and looks up at me. He wags his tail once, a slow, heavy thump against the wood. He does not want anything from me. He does not need me to be richer, under friends, or more compliant. He just wants to be near me. That is love. It is not breathless. It is quiet. It is boring in the most beautiful way possible. My phone buzzes on the glass table. I pick it up. It is a number I do not recognize, but the area code is Chicago. I open the message. Rose, please. I am sleeping in my car tonight. It is freezing. I know I messed up, but we had something real. You cannot just throw away 3 years. I miss you. I miss us. Please just call me. I stare at the words. A year ago, this text would have broken me. I would have felt guilty. I would have wondered if I was being too harsh. I would have sent money. I would have tried to fix him. But the Rose who needed to fix broken men died in that puppy mill. I do not feel anger. I do not feel hate. I look at the text and I feel absolutely nothing. It is like reading a message from a telemarketer. I do not reply. I do not type out a scathing response. He does not deserve my anger. He does not deserve my energy. I tap the small icon in the corner of the screen. Block caller. I set the phone down. Screen facing the table. Buster stands up and trots over to me, resting his heavy head on my knee. I scratch him behind the ears, right in the spot that makes his leg twitch. You are a good boy. I whisper. He licks my hand. I pick up my wine glass and lean back in my chair, closing my eyes against the warm afternoon sun. I am 32 years old. I am single. I am living in a city where I barely know anyone. And for the first time in my entire life, I am free.